This video comes with paragraph 6 about the criminal law, about how we punish and how the whole system is set up. But first of all, let's look into why do we punish? The whole system of punishment is monopolized by the government, all laid down in the criminal code. But why has it been monopolized by the government? Well, first of all, to prevent people from going into the street and taking punishment, taking the law into their own hands. So we get lynchings like we used to have in the past. It's a way to make sure that law has its procedure and that people do not just blindly go and punish themselves. Second, we punish because we want revenge and retribution. People have done something wrong, so they need to be punished. This is mainly a very strong idea from the Middle Ages, where the whole biblical principle, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, was the basis under our law system. But of course, still a reason to punish is retribution. Next to that, we want to make sure that people do not commit crimes. We want to scare them, deterrence. In the past, this was mostly done with very gruesome punishments and punishments which were executed publicly, like burning people on the stake for things they had done or hanging them. But it was to show the people that if you did something wrong, you would be fiercely punished for that. Now, of course, we don't burn people anymore, we do not execute them anymore, but still the idea behind a long punishment should still scare off people. But that's not the only reason to give a long punishment. That's of course also to make sure that people do not return into society, or at least do not quickly return into society. We want to make sure that the society is protected from people who really impose a threat to our society. So long incarceration of suspected terrorists, murderers, sex offenders. So that's a reason to punish as well, to protect the society against evildoers. The last reason to punish is rehabilitation. Since not all crimes or offenses lead to a long imprisonment, a part of the punishment is also rehabilitation. Trying to teach prisoners while they are imprisoned so they can safely return into society. Because they must be ready to return in society. Still, rehabilitation does not give us the effect that we hope for, as 3/4 of all prisoners, ex-prisoners, fall back on their bad behavior. So when we look at the whole scheme, we see that deterrence and retribution actually fit with all kind of punishments. Incapacitation or protection of society are things like the death penalty, which we do not have in the Netherlands anymore, but also incarceration, long imprisonment, and house arrest. People that have to wear a certain device and cannot go out of the house between certain hours. Uh, Within the imprisonment, you'll find that the prisoners have to be mandatory teached, get treatment, uh, and there is this system of probation. The fact that you're left out of prison, but the moment you make one small mistake, you immediately return. And then there's the part of restitution, which fits with retribution, which we see mostly back in fines. In how do we punish, the criminal code plays an important role. The criminal code is, again, based on the principle of legality. The first article of the criminal code states that no act constitutes a criminal offense except on the grounds of legal rules that have been laid down beforehand. And these rules, of course, have to be stated clearly. So it has to be a specific legal provision. Another big part of this criminal code is the double jeopardy rule, ne bis in idem. You cannot be persecuted for the same things, for the same fact, twice. Once a case has been done over a certain fact, the state cannot bring you to court over the same fact again. Now, in the criminal code, we have three parts. The first part is about the general provisions. It's a definition of all legal terms, all stated very clearly in the criminal code. So we know what we talk about when we talk about a criminal act, criminal intent, or liability, responsibility. When does something become a criminal act and when is something prosecutable? Then in the second part, there's a list of all the crimes. Crimes being serious offenses like, for example, homicide, but also sexual offenses, manslaughter, assault, you name it, the serious offenses. In the last part, there are minor offenses, and the differentiation between these two is very important. First of all, the serious offenses, the major crimes, they lead to heavier punishments, but also they stay longer on your personal criminal record. This list of minor offenses, you should think of things as trespassing, a disturbance of the peace, things that can be punished with a fine or with a very short incarceration. The criminal code also gives clear descriptions of penalties, the strafbepalingen. In this, we have a connection between the act and the maximum punishment. There's no minimum punishment stated in the law. That's up to the judge who weighs it. But there is a maximum punishment. For example, with manslaughter, it's a case of 15 years as maximum punishment. Manslaughter, as opposed to murder, does not lead to a lifetime imprisonment. The difference between manslaughter and murder is that in the case of murder, there's intent. Somebody planned to come to the act. Well, manslaughter does not come with a severe plan. So often you will see that the prosecutor will try and prove manslaughter because intent is of course very hard to prove. Anyway, all this must be clearly stated so that everyone knows what they're up to, and it's all clearly stated in, as I just said, de strafbepalingen en in strafrecht. The judge cannot ever exceed the maximum punishment as described in the criminal code, and this then again fits the principle of legality, as it defends us against haphazard choices of judges, and it actually tells us what we're up against at a maximum. About these punishments and the grounds for exclusion of punishment and the kind of penalties you can get, I will give more explanation in a later video, but for now I'm gonna call it wraps. Toodles!